Hi, I'm Heather McLean, editor at SVG Europe, and I'm here today with Natacha Jones, creative director at Nuel, home of UK University Esports, and also member of the Women in Esports Committee, part of the British Esports Association. Okay, Tasha, so tell me what your background is. What's your role in esports and how did you find this area?
So I first got involved in esports in 2015 when I was at university. So we started running tournaments and gaming festivals for students. And I also participated in Nuel, which is where I now work. I started producing broadcasts for these events, mostly because I was the only one with a computer good enough to do it, which gave me the skills to pick up freelance broadcast opportunities. And since then, I've worked on remote and studio and live event broadcasts, either as a broadcast producer or as an observer, which is like the in-game camera person, really. My current role is creative director, like you said. So I manage all of the creative output of the Nuel. So this is everything from the broadcasts that we do. We do like 8 broadcasts a week, all the way to branding and graphical output and stuff like that.
Cool. Nice and hectic, and what a great way to get into a career as well. Having fun at uni, and now you're actually working and being paid for it, doing the same thing. So, as someone with a strong broadcast background that you've built yourself, how do you think esports is changing the way broadcasting is carried out, and what can esports broadcasting actually bring to the traditional broadcast world in terms of techniques, technologies, and ways of approaching that area?
Yeah. So I think a huge amount of esports broadcasting happens remotely and has done even since way before the pandemic. Players will compete from home or from dedicated gaming spaces. They're not always at these events or at, so we call them LANs, which is just like a big collection of hundreds of gamers in one room. That means that the workflow has from the beginning involved kind of weird and wonderful workarounds to cope with remote work. And this is now super valuable to the traditional broadcasting world. For example, the cloud-based workflows that Riot uses to keep LoL esports going throughout the pandemic. All that kind of stuff is now really critical for traditional broadcasting and sports broadcasting.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. And what do you think is exciting about esports as a growth industry for you? Because I mean, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. You know, there was a few years ago we were kind of telling people what esports is and how it works, and now it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think the most exciting part is that there isn't tradition holding us back. I'm not sure who said it, but traditions are just peer pressure from dead people. So like we don't have that in esports because it's still quite new. There isn't one set or one agreed way to do anything. So we're always innovating and improvising. And then the other thing which is really exciting is that everyone shares these innovations that they've like conjured up. There's a community of sharing ideas with each other and learning from each other's expertise. It's not like gate kept.
Cool. Yeah, that's I like that. That's good. Yeah, no traditions, no boundaries either. Now, talking of traditions and things like that, women in esports, even though it's a brand new kind of area, there are very few women playing at grassroots level up to the top players. What do you think is keeping women out of esports today? You know, word has it that the environment can be quite misogynistic. What do you think? Tell me.
I think there are a lot of contributing factors, and it's quite a nebulous idea. Like, but if I were to summarize, I'd say that the toxic and negative attitude towards women in gaming is one of the core reasons. Like being constantly harassed for being a woman in online games knocks your confidence, makes the game less enjoyable, and makes you feel really isolated and unwelcome. And like, why would you want to put up with that on a daily basis? Why would you want to continue doing something which is harming like your mental health?
Yeah. And you're part of the British Esports Association's Women in Esports, which was launched in late 2019. So you've been going for 1 year now, admittedly, through a whole pandemic, which might have held things up. But can you tell us about what you're trying to do? So what's your goal? How are you approaching your campaign to increase the number of women in esports, given the kind of attitudes out there? What have your results been so far?
Yeah, so our goal when we started out was to improve inclusivity in esports through educating people, celebrating the achievements of people of marginalized gender, working in various different parts of the industry, and also working with tournament organizers to create best practices for inclusivity based on like hard evidence and statistics. So 1 year on, Women in Esports Committee has run a bunch of tournaments with Face It, with Rick's GG, and with Nuel, and published loads of interviews with people of marginalized gender from all across the industry, and also been involved in a bunch of different panels and taken solid steps towards kind of improving inclusivity in the industry.
Great, good. And what are your plans for 2021 in terms of increasing numbers of women playing?
So this year, we're going to focus on education again. The shift in focus is going to be towards more of a younger age. So the British Esports Association runs the championships, which is schools and colleges. And we think it's really important to start that education quite early on before they move into professional esports later in life. We're also going to focus on creating a community which celebrates women and people of marginalized gender in the industry and gives individuals a voice through the Discord server and also through creating a pledge. And the last thing we're going to do is aim to increase participation of women in tournaments so that we can get more feedback and more statistics and more evidence to back up the best practices that we want to implement.
How are you actually going to do that? Are you going to kind of like find people playing, spot specific names and invite them personally to come in, or how would that work?
So kind of two ways to put on tournaments for people of marginalized gender and kind of recognize how many take part and how we can promote it to reach those kind of people that wouldn't normally take part in mixed tournaments, but also to look at mixed tournaments run by partners of the committee, so Face It and Nuel, and to get statistics from that on the participation of women in those tournaments.
Cool, good, excellent. That sounds like a great plan. And last one for you: how has the pandemic affected your work at the British Esports Association? And have esports been able to continue to grow in this period? I guess because everything's remote anyway, and everyone's at home anyway, it shouldn't have made too much difference, but has it?
Esports is definitely still growing despite the pandemic. I think it's been a tough year and a bit because we haven't had any live events, at least in the UK and most of Europe. We've not had live events, which is difficult because that's normally like the big
like social aspect of it kind of thing.
Yeah. But in terms of the work that the Women in Esports Committee do, most of that was already remote, like you said, so there's not much of a change there. Yeah.
Great. Okay, onwards and upwards for women in esports.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Thank you very much, Tasha.
Thank you.